I'm Sarah Richardson, a principal here at This Week Health, where our mission is healthcare transformation powered by community. This is Flourish Sound Bytes, unfiltered conversations with healthcare leaders. Let's get real. Welcome back to Flourish. I am Sarah Richardson, and today's Sound Bite features a seasoned and purpose-driven leader, Erik Howell. With 25 years of experience leading transformational change in healthcare, Erik has done it all, from EHR implementations and guiding multi-million-dollar enterprise projects as a consultant to working for a Silicon Valley AI software startup to scale its delivery and client success teams. But Erik's story takes a unique turn. He intentionally stepped away from his career for a sabbatical, something many leaders dream of, but few actually do. He returned with renewed energy, perspective, and alignment to his values. Today, we're going to talk about that journey, the lessons he's bringing back into healthcare innovation, and why stepping away may just be the secret to stepping forward. Erik, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sarah. I love that tagline. Stepping away might be the secret to stepping forward. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you today.
I am too. And for those of you listening, we wrote an article, or Erik wrote an article, and I got to throw some quotes in a while back about that sabbatical and that journey and why it was so formative in his career. But I'm going to start by asking you about being a transformational leader, especially in the consulting space, because you have led some of the most complex and large-scale transformations in healthcare, EHR implementations, enterprise PMOs, and even scaling a digital startup. Looking back, what are the common threads that make these efforts succeed?
There are some table stakes here, like alignment with organizational strategy and having an ROI that you are confident you're going to attain. But when I look back at some of the biggest transformations I've led, the top things that come to mind are, they're not necessarily the sexiest or the most exciting to talk about, but quality planning is one, leadership alignment and consistent messaging, being able to have organizational focus. And I'll add a fourth one that is fun to talk about, which is change management. I love talking about change management. But starting with planning, I'm curious, Sarah, have you ever been talking about an upcoming project with someone saying that kickoff is in 2 or 3 months, and the person you were talking to thought kickoff meant go live?
Oh, it's actually a common theme when you're like educating the organization about how to get stuff done. Yes.
It's crazy. If I had a dime for every time that happened, I'd easily have like $3 or $4. So now I make sure to make clear, like, kickoff is the start of the project after that planning phase is complete, right? So, but like, how much planning is enough for a big transformational project, like a month, a quarter, a year? It makes sense to me to think about it on a spectrum or even a graph where the cost of failure is like your y-axis and the time to plan is your x-axis, where on one end, you have something like a big SpaceX mission to Mars that requires decades of planning because the cost of failure is just catastrophic, right? And on the other end, you have a small project like a workflow tweak in a clinic where it doesn't make sense to spend more time planning than doing the work. And in the middle sits something like a big EHR implementation, which is a big transformation for a health system. They're huge. They touch almost every user in the organization. They directly impact patients and finances, but you can't plan for decades, right? But you also can't skip the groundwork. So the key is really balancing the risk and cost of a bad outcome with the time and resources you invest up front. The second thread for a successful transformation is leadership alignment and consistent messaging. A mentor of mine shaped my thinking here when he taught me a simple but effective principle to make a message stick, which is tell people what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Like, think of a meeting that's effective and well run. Like, you start with the agenda, you deliver the content, and you close with a recap of what was discussed and the decisions made. And it feels repetitive, and it can get to feel boring after you're doing this for 6 months or a year. But politicians do it all the time with consistent messaging and taglines because it's important for us to all hear things over. And in large transformations, senior leaders need that same discipline. Consistent talking points repeated across meetings and venues so that everyone in the organization hears the same steady message. And the third theme here is focus. I'm curious, Sarah, I'm sure the answer here is yes, but have you ever seen an organization try to juggle too many transformations at once?
I had that conversation with a CIO this morning. Yes.
And you know what, if they involve different teams, then maybe you can pull it off. Like construction of a new hospital and a new ERP system, like arguably there's overlap there, but perhaps that's manageable overlap. but organizations can't do everything at once. There's only so many transformational projects you can take on, and leaders have to protect that focus. And so if you're implementing a new AHR, many times that has to be the transformation for that season. None of our CEOs like to hear this, but trying to do too much at once just spreads the organization too thin. And finally, last, but my most favorite to talk about is change management, which is very distinct from change control for any of the techie folks out there listening. And there's been a lot of lip service given to change management, I think, over the last 5 years, especially. And there are many ways to do it. I'm a big believer in the ProSci ADKAR model. ADKAR stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement. And it's a framework that forces you to think about how you'll take each of your stakeholder groups through those 5 sequential ADKAR steps of change. Lots of tools you can layer on top of that framework, but at the very least, when I'm doing a big transformational project, ADKAR, how I design communications, training, and support. And even if it's applied imperfectly, which often is the case, I don't think I've ever done it perfectly. It makes the difference between a thoughtful project that sticks and one that struggles.
I love that you bring up ADKAR because I've been such a fan of ProSci for years. I actually had a previous team, 20 people, all the EPMO and all the major leaders in IT get their ProSci certification so that the conversation was a common vocabulary. And we made the investment of actually utilizing the ProSci tool set, which is not inexpensive, and yet the cost of a failed project is actually more than. And so once you get through all the, ROI and return on value of making the ProSci investment, you realize, hey, you know what? We haven't had 70% of our projects fail anymore. And to your point, that conversation this morning with the CIO going through a major acquisition, and they're like, we need to have Q1 be integration. And yet there's 50 projects on the docket that are separate from integration. And I said, you know as well as I do that Q1, if that's your integration period, it needs to be a freeze period or just a break fix only for the other stuff, because you may integrate something that significantly gets changed or has to be redone because of the other projects happening in tandem. So all your points are spot on.
Entirely.
So why pivot from consulting into a Silicon Valley healthcare startup?
Yeah, so I graduated from college back in 2002 with a degree in computer engineering, and I went right into consulting, working for Ernst & Young. But I'd always wondered what life would be like if I worked for a Silicon Valley software company at that time. I'm curious, Sarah, is there like a fork in your career that you wondered what would have happened if you had chosen a different path?
Well, yeah, I started in hospitality. So yeah, the only win, Eric, is that they've merged at this point in our careers because hospitality patient experience. But yeah, I left hospitality to go into healthcare back in 2000.
So when I graduated, Google came to my college to recruit. And at that time, they had about 500 employees. And so I wondered what that would have been like. So working for a software startup was in some ways kind of scratching that 20-year-old itch. Also, after 20 years in consulting, I was ready for a change. Consulting had given me really great exposure to health systems and projects and different health tech, but it started to feel like I was running some of the same plays. So I was asking myself, like, what's next? I was pretty sure I wanted to stay in healthcare and technology, but I wanted a new lens on that. And the 2 paths I saw for me were working for a provider, which I do now, or joining a software company. So I joined Cuventus, a Silicon Valley startup that's focused on machine learning and Gen AI solutions for hospitals and health systems. And it's a really fantastic software company solving some of the hardest problems, like reducing length of stay and improving surgical access. And because they're solving some of the hardest problems, the solutions take more than just tech, more than just the software. There's a lot of people and process redesign and the transformation themes that we were just talking about. So my role in the company was to lead a delivery team of about 50 people, where our responsibility was implementation of the solution that guided clients through adoption and achieving ROI, ongoing client success, so the health system would become a long-term partner. And in many ways, it was a natural extension of what I did and learned in consulting.
What did you learn from the experience of working in a software startup? Because we still hear about startups and new innovation all the time. And quite honestly, all these point solutions are hitting CIOs at a pace faster than ever. So how are you not only taking that experience, but also balancing that in your new role?
I'm so glad that I got the experience to see what it's like to be inside of a software company. It was fascinating and a great experience. And a lot of my consulting skills and experience transferred. So if anyone else is interested in a similar pivot, know that it can be done. One thing that was really interesting was the internal dynamics of the organization. So in consulting, most of us had similar roles, just at different levels: staff consultant, senior consultant, and so on. We sold work, we delivered work, and success was pretty straightforward. Like I was the sales, delivery, and solution builder of a product in a way in consulting. But in a software company, the roles are distinct and often competing. So the sales team is pushing for new features that they can sell to new clients. The implementation team is making sure that promises from sales can and are delivered. The client success team wants improvements for the base client base for existing customers. And then engineering, there's always some tech debt, and engineering always wants time in the roadmap to reduce that tech debt. And product is in the middle and of navigating these priorities and all these tough calls. And it's this really fascinating push and pull in the organization that I didn't see in consulting. Being in the provider space, I see a little bit of it, but it really was quite a unique environment to be in. I'm curious if you've seen that in some of your leadership roles in orgs you've been in with competing priorities in the organization itself.
Well, that and on top of being a product development, software development organization, which was my most previous role,
Mm.
making sure that all those people have the same philosophy about how to get those things done. So you get out of a build trap, as I call it, is really key.
Yes. Yeah. And I would say the company that I worked for did a great job of that. And so it becomes this healthy tension within the organization when it's done well. But early on, I was primarily advocating for my team, and that was a mistake. Over time, I learned to raise my perspective and to help balance priorities across the whole company. The other big lesson I learned that was fascinating, and now when I see software companies do it well, I think it's brilliant, is the importance of scalability and how a software org scales and how ultimately you want to lean less on delivery and build it more into the solution itself. So in consulting, if you need more capacity, you can bring on contractors within weeks and sometimes even pass that cost to the client. Software companies usually don't have that lever to pull as easily. So we had to decide, do we hire for my delivery team based on the sales pipeline, or do we wait? And more importantly, like, can and how do we support more clients without adding headcount by improving processes or improving the software itself to do some of delivery's function, like onboarding and like user adoption. So efficiency mattered in a way that was different than I had experienced before, because like the goal over time with SaaS is for your delivery function to shrink as a percentage of your revenue. And that was one of the goals that I had. I loved the team that I built there and the experience that I had. And a little ironically, part of the reason my role was eliminated there, in addition to some restructuring, was because I had built such a strong team that didn't need me as much as they did when I began there.
But you didn't take that downsizing as a failure on your part. You actually pivoted and made that a midlife career break so you could travel, reflect, and recharge. I'm sure there was a little bit of that soul searching and the different pieces that had happened for sure, but it was a bold decision in the middle of such a successful career. What led you to make that choice?
Well, I'd be lying if I didn't admit that it didn't feel like failure at the time. Before we go into some of that, I would like to talk about how leaders frame some of their departures. So when my role was eliminated, this is just an interesting topic that I'm interested in other leaders' perspectives on. I would love to talk more about it with folks, but I had the choice of how to frame it. And, many leaders take the option to say they resigned, which makes the exit seem voluntary when maybe in reality it wasn't. And I think individuals departing do this so they aren't viewed as a failure. And I think companies decide to do this so the remaining employees don't worry about instability. So it allows both sides in a way, kind of the departing leader and the company, to save face. I'm interested if you've ever struggled with that or noticed other leaders struggle with that, Sarah, about how to talk about career transitions like that.
Oh, I was fired from an organization after I'd been recruited. And for a long time, I said exactly that. We agreed to disagree. We agreed on a mutual split. End of the day, not really. It was just a bad cultural fit. And I didn't ask the right questions going into the organization. And I wasn't who they wanted and vice versa. So years later, I almost wear that badge of honor. But it took me a long time to get to a place where I could say, yes, I got fired.
Yeah. And there was definitely a week where I really struggled with it, but it wasn't a resignation. So it didn't feel authentic to frame it that way. So I ultimately told my team, my colleagues, my friends, and my family that my role was eliminated. And I'll always be immensely grateful to the company for the runway they gave me at the end as well. Allowed me in part to do the sabbatical, and the way they allowed me to depart with a lot of integrity, I'm really grateful for. But it was really tough. In some ways, I felt like a failure. I had tied my identity to career success, to climbing the ladder and being proud of the companies I worked for. And suddenly the company was saying it didn't need me. And that was really hard. I was tempted to update my resume immediately and not do the sabbatical, but I was also really burned out. I had been sprinting for years, and I was always thinking if I just pushed a little harder, I'll make it to the finish line. But my endurance was gone. I was gassed. So being burned out like that, along with some lovely timing in my personal life, gave me an opening for the concept of this sabbatical. My husband and I were already living nomadically. We were moving month to month in Airbnbs across the US due to being able to work remotely. And we had a little bit of savings. And so we thought, why not pull a few months of retirement forward, keep traveling, but take it internationally and turn this into an intentional sabbatical period of 6, 9, 12 months, unsure exactly how long it would be. That's what led to the decision.
And I love, like, I remember chatting with you while you were still on sabbatical, and I'm like, can I come join you in Mexico right now? I always think about, so where are Erik and Chad today? Like, I get to go hang out and do the same thing. Because in your article, you shared how that sabbatical shaped your next chapter. So what were the biggest lessons learned, Erik, that shifted your perspective?
Yeah, it was really uncomfortable at first. I had equated so much of my worth with productivity, and suddenly I didn't have deadlines, I didn't have deliverables. So one important lesson was detachment from work and a work identity. I always thought of myself as like really loyal to many of the places I worked, and I really overly identified with my job. It's a hard habit to break and easy to slip back into, actually. So I love that we're having this discussion today to remind me of some of my lessons from my sabbatical, which wasn't that long ago. The truth is, companies have to make hard business decisions all the time, either because of tough financial times or a shift in focus or to optimize in a different way. So I needed to create more mental separation space, more energetic separation between myself and my job. And I learned what it looks like for my career to not define me. Another lesson was balance and time for fun. So my husband and I finally took the honeymoon we never had because I'd been working too much. We made incredible memories together. I got to share some of those with you as we were going to places I couldn't recommend more highly, Mexico City and Mallorca. I could do a whole podcast on those if people want to talk about like some of the travel adventures we did. But those months together really gave us stories and experiences that will carry forever. Another one that I wasn't sure about, I felt that I wanted to stay in the space of healthcare technology, but I wasn't sure. And taking a step away from it really reaffirmed that I do love this space. Because even when I wasn't working, I found myself listening to This Week Health and other podcasts like it and reading about AI in healthcare. And it didn't feel like pressure to do that. Like I was keeping up on the latest thing. Like it was fun to participate in those conversations or to hear those conversations. So it reminded me this is the field that I want to keep contributing to. And finally, and maybe most importantly for me, I reframed retirement and what I used to perceive as the importance of it. I used to think I want to get there as fast as possible, retire by 50 or 55, make as much money as I could, stock it away in order to do that. But after 3 months of rest, I realized I was ready to work again. Like I wanted to use my brain. I wanted to solve problems. I wanted to contribute. I think humans are wired that way, or at least this human is. Like I like to make progress and I like to add value. And doing that from a place of total financial freedom sure would be nice. But I also know now that like when I do retire, I'm not going to be the type that just wants to sit on a beach. It's just not me. So working up until Medicare eligibility doesn't sound as bad as it used to. And because of that, it really impacted what my next career choice would be. I didn't need to maximize income at all costs, that I could actually find a role that felt like it aligned with purpose and things that mattered more than just income.
So if Medicare gets moved to 70 or later, are you going to throw in those extra 5 years, or are you totally cool with planning for that 65-year window?
We will see. I'm 45 at the moment, so I feel like I still have a little bit of runway to figure all of that out, but I hope it stays at 65.
Yeah, same, because that means I'm only 14 years away. So I'm a few steps ahead of you for sure. But now you've re-entered the workforce in a mission-focused role aligned with your values. How did you know it was the right fit?
So during my sabbatical, I used a framework called the flower exercise. And it's from a book called What Color is Your Parachute? The book is fine. I didn't read it from start to finish. I'm not sure that I'd recommend that, but that particular flower exercise is fantastic for figuring the type of role, the type of organization that aligns with what you want to do next. I also asked myself, if my career ended today, what would be missing from my biography? If I were to go back and write right now what I want it to be like at the end of my career, what's not in there yet? And for me, the missing piece was clear. Like, I decided that I wanted to work within a provider organization. I wanted to be in a CIO or transformation type role in a provider organization, and one that was doing good. And specifically, I wanted to be in one that focused on serving the LGBTQ plus community. So that really became my focus. There are about 10 community health center FQHCs in the US that fit that description. I stalked every one of them. I researched their boards and leaders. I learned about their challenges and strategies, and I imagined where I could add value. I LinkedIn stalked, I friend of friends stalked, I knocked on the doors of CEOs and COOs to introduce myself, be like, hey, I'm Erik. You got 15 minutes, just get on your calendar and say hello. So I was really very laser focused on this one healthcare segment for 3 months. And I don't know, like I'm interested if others have found that narrowing a focus like this makes a search more successful, or if casting a wide net makes it more successful. I'm not sure if you have experience on that, Sarah.
I believe, Erik, to your point, it depends on the level of awareness and intentionality because you had the finances to be able to be selective. And sometimes people get to that point where they just need to pay their bills. And so
Mhm.
I would recommend to people have 6 months savings in the bank because you never know what may happen. And when you aren't worried about literally keeping the lights on at home, you can be a bit more strategic about what you choose to do next.
I love that. So I gave myself that 3-month runway to land a role at one of those 10 orgs. And I had a plan that if I didn't land that after 3 months, then I'd widen the lens to other types of healthcare providers that I thought were doing good. And then after that, perhaps widen the lens further. I was also open to doing some contracting work to extend my runway along the way because I couldn't, like you said, I couldn't make not making income last forever. But ultimately, I didn't have to do those things. And maybe I got lucky. Maybe it was that clarity of focus, but I landed the role at the dream company that I was looking for. So today, I'm Vice President, Head of Technology at Callen-Lorde Community Health Center here in New York City. We focus on providing culturally competent care to New York City's LGBTQ plus community. And we really pride ourselves on providing the gold standard of that care. We don't have a CIO or CIDO position here, so that's effectively the role I'm playing, where applications, innovation, data analytics, and infrastructure operations all report up to me. And I'm just so grateful that I get to apply my skills and experience in a provider organization that I believe in so deeply and align technology and transformation to support that mission. And one more thing that made it crystal clear that I was in the right place. The first all staff meeting that I attended was emceed by a couple of drag queens, complete with lip sync performances. So I was like, yep, folks here are fun, creative, they're safe to show up in a way that makes them shine. Like, I found the right spot.
Oh my gosh, wait, how often do you have those meetings?
Every 6 months.
I'm gonna like find a reason to attend. I'm like, I'm just here to have a good time, just here to watch. And I'm like, can they do Love Cats by The Cure? I would be like,
Oh my gosh, I'll put
epic.
in a special request. We'll make it
I would
happen.
definitely, I'm like, I want that song to be what's performed. I absolutely love that. So, what advice would you give to leaders who may feel stuck and are afraid of stepping away?
I'd say listen to that discomfort and fear. It's pointing to growth. This is my first podcast interview, and I've been nervous as heck to do this, but that discomfort to me means there's an opportunity for growth. And in the case of stepping away, as we said earlier, it doesn't mean falling behind. I think sometimes the most important career move is to pause, recalibrate, and then re-enter with clarity and be intentional. Like, whatever space that you can create, ask yourself some hard questions. Like, what would my biography look like if my career ended today? Or what kind of organization and impact really matters to me? That clarity will turn your next move into the right fit. But also just take some space to have fun. Life is too short.
It absolutely is. And I'm so grateful that you shared that perspective with the audience because I don't believe anybody listening would ascertain this is your first podcast. And so kudos to you for really taking to heart the opportunity to not only share your journey, but it also helps when you have a friendship that's already established. And I'm just grateful to you as well because you've expanded things that I wasn't aware of. I didn't know there were 10 FQHCs that were specific to the LGBTQ community. And I live in Northern California and we have several opportunities here in this part of the country. So I'm grateful that there's always a safe place for people to go to get their healthcare and that people are seen and heard and valued. And I love that you are now in an organization where you get to bring all of the best things together for your life and for your profession. And I bet there's not as much of a division of your identity through what you serve at home, what you serve at work, even though you are still very respectful of the fact that at the end of the day, it's okay to close the laptop.
Yes. I mean, I still work my patootie off.
Yeah.
I care very deeply about the role that I play in the organization. And I can respect a little bit more work-life balance than I had in previous roles.
And it's time for speed round, Erik. Are you ready?
I'm
Okay.
ready.
All right. One leadership trait you believe is most underrated.
Quiet steadiness. It's not flashy. It doesn't grab attention, but it builds trust. And in times of change, which my organization is experiencing a lot of right now, people look for consistency.
They do. And you and I've chatted about more than charisma. So you can be as charming as you need to be. At the end of the day, you still have to be able to deliver. All right. Book, podcast, or resource that inspired you during your sabbatical.
I'm going to give you a few. This is not just because I'm on this podcast, but This Week Health, absolutely. It reminded me I still love this space, and I appreciate all the content that you, Bill, and Drex are putting out there. So my husband loves celebrity autobiographies, and during our road travels, we spent a lot of time in the car, and we listened to a bunch read by celebrities themselves. I love them. They remind me that even these folks that we put on pedestals, they have some of the same challenges and delights that we do, because we really are all the same. Two I'd recommend: Barbara Streisand's and Elvira's are both so good. Barbara talks a ton about food and good company, and it's really funny and connecting to think that a scoop of ice cream or planning what's for dinner can be the highlight of Barbara's day, just like it could be the highlight of mine. There's one more. There's a novel that I read that really reminded me to pause, to be outside, to connect with nature, and to expand when I get stuck in my head. There's a gorgeous novel called Prodigal Summer by Barbara Kingsolver, and I read that one while in Mallorca, and it really brought me back to a center.
Yeah, she's amazing. Have you read Demon Copperhead?
Not yet.
I'll just send it to you because I have it on my shelf. I'd love to share books. I mail them out all the time. And I have a few of her others on my shelf I need to read. She's absolutely phenomenal. And you really do become the characters. Like you have so much empathy for them and for what they're represented. So I'm glad you chose her as well. And if you could go back though and give your younger self one piece of career advice, what would it be?
To not over-identify with my job, because change is inevitable. And related to that, don't lose sleep over wanting to get a gold star or fearing failure, because my ego is not my ego.
Very powerful. Erik, thank you for sharing your story with us today. Your journey is such a powerful reminder that stepping away doesn't mean falling behind. It can mean stepping forward with clarity and with courage. For our listeners, I encourage you to check out Erik's article, Midlife Recharge, on LinkedIn. It's an inspiring read about how a career pause can create space for realignment and growth. Erik, thank you again.
Thank you, Sarah. I loved it.
That's Flourish Soundbites. Find your community at thisweekhealth.com/subscribe. Every healthcare leader needs a community to learn from and lean on. Share the wisdom. That's all for now.